I talk a lot about being the best, being a championship team, putting up championship numbers, being a championship player coach. And I think that excellence requires confidence, which is yet another cornerstone. So I guess we're
That's a
building a.
tweet.
Yeah.
Listen, that's a tweet. I'm
Oh,
going
is
to
it?
just tell you excellence requires confidence. Oh, Tony, I feel that all in my DNA right now. Like, I just want to go print that off, laminate it, and slap it up on my wall. Like, excellence requires confidence. Oh. Hey, Entreleaders, happy Wednesday, and welcome to another episode of the Leaders Lab podcast. I am very thrilled about our segment on today. Here in the Leaders Lab, we talk all things leadership, entrepreneurship, communication. And ironically, our very special guest today is, I would say, a leading expert in each one of those categories. So you are definitely in for a treat with Mr. Tony Ahn. He is a marketing leader with a particular expertise in marketing startups. And of his work, one of his colleagues once said to him, Tony, your business card should have a photo of you wearing fatigues and a bandolier of ammo while chomping a cigar. You are the guerrilla marketing king. Now, Tony specializes in marketing seed, stage, and Series A startups, which are often cash strapped, which is why he's a master of guerrilla marketing tactics. Tony is an agency trained expert. He has headed the first digital services team at the largest integrated marketing communications agency in the Philippines. And after that, he went on to open his own agency, Tony Ahn and Company, with offices in Manila and Seattle back in the States, which launched and marketed dozens of American, Australian, British, Singaporean, and Filipino startups in the decade that he led it. In 2015, Philippine Society magazine Rogue called him a digital PR pioneer and the unseen hand that shapes public perception of some of the biggest names in the Philippines. In 2020, he made the decision to jump the fence and go from agency side to client side, serving as director of product marketing for Entry, an American software as a service startup based in Austin that uses AI to remove bias from the recruitment and hiring process. Tony's with us today to talk about how to make your entrepreneurial venture the best that it can be through effective leadership. We before we get into that, I do want to say I want to bring him up here, and I want to say welcome to the Leaders Lab podcast, sir.
I'm very, very honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, Tony, you have, first of all, you have a very interesting background here. But first, tell me, what was it that you did that had your colleague to say, you're the king of guerrilla marketing?
Oh gosh. I'm really good at sort of making something out of nothing and doing stuff on really small budgets. And specifically that particular person, it was because early on, me and three friends of mine decided to start a publishing company writing books for people that play Dungeons and Dragons. And we exhibited at PAX, the Penny Arcade Exposition in Seattle, in its second year. We had the idea for the company at PAX in its first year. So we created a game. It was like an MMORPG that you could play live on site at the game. And we pitched it to PAX, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to do this. This is amazing. And so the combat was based on rock, paper, scissors, but you had cards, and you could sort of like modify your throw so that like you could have a card in your hand that said like scissors never beats me. But then somebody else could have a card that says your card doesn't work. And so you would sort of equip these three cards, and then you would throw, and then you would show each other your cards and sort of decide how combat was resolved based on what was in your hand. And then there was like prizes for the people that had the most kills at the end of the show. So we negotiated, and that was where I learned something really important. What Penny Arcade said, okay, you can have a booth. And I was kind of hoping for more than that. And so I kind of realized I'm in the middle of a negotiation with a multi-million-dollar company, and I don't really know how to do this. So I had recently read that MIT had put all their coursework online. So I got online and I read all the coursework from MIT's business school for negotiation. And I learned about a concept called BATNA. It stands for Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. And what your BATNA is if you're negotiating with somebody and then the deal falls through, you don't come to an agreement, what are you going to do instead? The most important thing to know in a negotiation is your own BATNA. And the second most important thing to know is their BATNA. Okay. And so and it's also often very important to keep your BATNA a secret if it's not very good. So I knew that our BATNA was nothing. We didn't have another play. But Penny Arcade didn't know that. So I went to their competition, which was Gen Con, which had a big conference on the East Coast in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, I got this really great game. What do you give us for it? And Gen Con's owned by Wizards of the Coast, which is also in Seattle, like Penny Arcade. Okay. So it was easy to walk over to their offices. And they were like, okay, well, we'll give you a double-sized free booth space. We'll give you $50,000 in free advertising. We'll give you a free show bag insert. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. And it was this great. It was like a $100,000 package. So then I went back to Penny Arcade and said, hey, I'd love to come and do this game there, but Gen Con's really hooking us up. And they were like, come in for a meeting. And we went in for a meeting, and because I knew my BATNA was nothing, but they didn't. I knew their BATNA was, we're going to Gen Con, and they did not want that because they were an upstart. They were trying to disrupt the space, and they were new. And so they said, they said, we'll match the offer. And it was like, great, because we didn't have any other shot anyway. But the guerrilla marketing thing wasn't that. It was that at the show, a lot of the big companies, Ubisoft, Nintendo, they would sponsor these huge parties in the evening after the day's events. And the press would go there and interview people and stuff like that. And our little company was called Technomancer Press. It ran for 4 years from 2004 to 2008. But I wanted to do something like that too. So what I did is I went to one of the smaller parties and I said, we would like to co-sponsor with you. And they were like, get out of here. Because parties are expensive to put on. I said, no, this will be good. I want to sponsor your bathroom. And they were like, what? And I said, I want to sponsor your bathroom. All I want to do is stand by the door like a bathroom attendant, and like we'll give mints to people that are coming out and ask them if everything came out okay, to ham it up, be funny. And if anybody, throws up, I'll take care of it. Like, we'll make sure that like we keep your bathroom clean is one less thing that, your programmers who are doubling as booth staff on site don't have to do. And one of the companies was like, okay, you can sponsor our bathroom. I was like, just want one thing. I'd like to put a sign on the door that says this bathroom is sponsored by Technomancer Press with our logo and our colors and stuff. And he was like, okay. And we got more press. Wow. And so one of the PAX organizers saw that, Mike Faylauer, and he was the one that made the comment about I should look like a gorilla in my business card.
Not only is that creative, but that is absolutely insane for someone to say, I just want the sign on the bathroom. Like, most people be like, I don't want to be associated with like a restroom or bathroom. I love it. Like, I think it's ingenious.
I wore a suit. Like, I did it like super classy, so we were like, no, we're trying to elevate the bathroom experience. What are you talking about? I played it straight.
I love it.
People acted like it was a joke. I was like, I don't understand. I'm just trying to make sure that your experience in the bathroom is as good as it is at the party.
I love it. And so how that type of, now I see why your colleague said what he said. So with that type of spirit, that type of mentality, how did that help you as you continued on?
Oh gosh.
Because you started, I saw that, first of all, the way we met, I had no idea that you had spent time in the Philippines and all of this stuff, so how I mean, you got to tell us more, because now that I'm sitting back here and I'm picturing you in this suit in front of the bathroom, with these people talking about, I want your bathroom experience to be just as great, as the party. Now I'm like, okay, no, now this is a man of not only creativity, but of wisdom and some strategy. So you're here in the Leadership Lab to teach us today. So tell us more.
That kind of creativity, that thinking outside the box. I'm in marketing, so creativity is part of what we do. But I think that
Yeah.
that can be applied to a lot of other places and situations in business. So, for
Okay.
example, when you're a startup, you're often cash strapped, and out of the box thinking can really help. When I first started my agency, so I had just left my former agency. And I got the best compliment that a former employer can give you when you start your own business, which is they invested in my new startup. I think it was so they could keep track of their competition, but the other half was because I did good work for them. I hope. The office space that I rented was this was before WeWork and before co-working was a thing, and so it wasn't like if you just had a couple employees, you could rent a couple seats somewhere. So I found it was like third-rate space in a second-rate building in the Manhattan of the Philippines. It was down on Ayala Avenue in the Central Business District. And when I had it remodeled, as we were doing our fit out before we got started, I was in there working with the carpenters and the masons and stuff like that. Like, okay, we're gonna do this here. We're gonna lay this down here. Like I was doing all that stuff. Because we needed to keep costs down. So when we got it built out, what we had two individual offices. We had an open plan area with about 6 seats. And then we had a conference room and then sort of like a break area. But when I first started, I only brought 2 employees with me and we were planning to scale. So I had extra space that we weren't using. And one thing I didn't have was a graphic artist. So what I did was I advertised in a couple like graphic artist groups in the Philippines on Facebook and said, hey, I'm looking for 1 or 2 graphic artists that want a professional space to work in, want a conference room to be able to meet clients, have a receptionist that can, get you a cup of coffee or a glass of water or something like that. And your people that you're bringing in. So, you want to kind of step it up and go more professional. And I only want 5 hours of design time a week. And I had 2. They were a couple actually that were like, we'll each give you 5 hours a week. And I was like, here are your seats. And they brought their own computers. And so the first thing we did was had them do all of our logo and our trade dress and like design everything for our website. And then when we kind of got done with all our own graphic arts needs, we started selling what they would do. So like I would have a client that would need a website built, and they would do all the design work for the website, and I would sell their design work, so talk about a 50% or 100% markup. It's an infinite markup when you're selling somebody who's, you're paying 0 for it, and then you're charging, $50 an image or something like that. Yeah. So those were some of the ways I kept costs down. What do I have in terms of resources? And most people don't look around and go, empty space, that's a resource. But I did. And so I sort of invented co-working before it was a thing, and didn't do it for money. I don't mean I invented it like worldwide. I don't want to be like Al Gore. That's like, I invented the internet, but I had it going on before it was something that people did.
Yeah. So you started, you went over to overseas and you started this, and you took 2 employees with you. You saw that there was a need for others, and you hired some other people. Now, but you said there was an exchange, so you provided space, not necessarily the funds. Like how did that work?
Well, I already had the space, and so I just said, you can come in and sit there, and then you give me 5 hours of design time. So I got something like the space would have been there whether I used it or not. I just made sure I used my extra space to generate something.
Wow.
Yeah.
And these were you thoroughly well, obviously if you kept them, but were you thoroughly satisfied with the work that
Oh yeah,
people
I
that
mean,
you
I looked
brought
at their
in?
portfolios before they came on, but they
Okay.
both did like world class pro level work, and they
Wow.
were with me for well over a year, and so that was great.
Do you feel like hiring them and the other people that you had with you, you feel like that's a key part to success, the success that you experienced?
Well, I mean, you need to lead people if you want to grow. Unless I mean, you can be a successful freelancer or a one person shop and do that. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you should do. But if you want to grow, then you need to be able to lead.
Okay, so here, we have a lot of creative entrepreneurs and creative, well, we call them entreleaders, entrepreneurs and leaders. We
Correct.
have a lot of them who tune into this podcast, and me being one of them as well. And a lot of times, especially as multi-passionate creatives, we have so many things that we're doing and with our businesses and everything, and we need help. How do you help somebody like me?
Well, it's not an easy thing. I want to say that. You mentioned earlier about me going overseas, and that was actually a big help because I've lived over half my adult life as a minority living overseas,
Yeah.
and I've been an immigrant that came to a country and didn't speak the language 3 times, and that being Korea, China, and the Philippines. When I left, I spoke the language, but when I got
Yeah.
there, I did not. That's made me really perceptive, I feel like, because
Okay.
when you can't speak the language, it's all about watching and learning and then listening and learning so you can figure out how to speak. And
Yeah.
so, and that's important so you don't make cultural mistakes and so you don't attract attention, which is often frowned upon in countries that I lived in Asia. And, I've never stopped watching, listening, and learning. I'm no smarter than other marketing leaders. I really believe that. And actually, I feel like I have a lot to learn from a lot of them. I have access to all the same marketing technology, the same tools that they do. I hire really good people, but my competition hires really good people too. And so,
Yeah.
to answer your question about, how I can help you, I'd say that hiring, it's widely held in the business world that hiring is the most important decision in building a business, and I agree with that. However, making great hiring decisions just sets you up for success. It doesn't guarantee it. It's you have to have a good foundation to build a solid house, but having a good foundation doesn't mean the house is going to be a fantastic house. I like to use sports analogs or analogies. Finding the right people to support you is necessary for building a championship team, not just players, but coaches and support staff too. You're not going to win a championship or in business beat your competition or disrupt your industry if you only have average individuals. So you've got to find people that are far better than average. The winningest coach in NCAA basketball once remarked, somebody said to him one time, the only time you've ever won championships, and he's won 11, is when you had great players. And he said, okay, tell me the names of coaches who won championships with lousy players. It's not going to happen, right? So, you have to hire the best people you can get, and then you have to train them and mold them into a team. And that starts with your very first hire. The number one thing that you have to do after coming into your position is know what you don't know. So the first thing that you do is find someone that knows all those things, that has the skills that you don't have, or that you struggle with. If you're the leader, then you have the vision, so you came up with this idea. Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is the kind of team we're going to have. This is how we're going to deliver. But somebody needs to execute that plan. And that may not be you, because maybe, being the vision holder, you have 1,000 ideas, but you don't know how to best execute every single one of them.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs once said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. But I also like the way that legendary auto executive 𝗖𝗟𝗘𝗚 put it. And he basically just said, I hire brighter people than me, and then I get out of their way. So make sure that you like that?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I always say, make sure that you find someone who knows things that you don't know and that has skills you don't have, because once hired, the two of you comprise the very first team that you're going to have, that you're going to lead. That's your first big recruit, and you have got to get that one right.
Something that you said that I feel like it was great conviction. I feel like it was great conviction and also like instruction between both of the quotes that you use. It's about hiring the right people, hiring smart people, bright people, getting out of their way, and allowing them to do what you have, hired them to do. But I think for those of us who are like hiring interns who are trying to look for, that experience, it may. Maybe I'm just talking for me. It seems like you have to do both because they don't really know. They're interns. They don't really know. They're trying to gain that experience, and you also have to like teach them. But is there a way to like?
I'm glad you brought that up. I don't remember who
Okay.
said this. I just read this the other day. I think I posted it either on my LinkedIn or my Facebook. But somebody talked about that when we work, when we go to the gym, when we go and do things, we spend 80% of our time operating at a level below our capacity. So like when you go to the gym, if you look at like champion bodybuilders, they only pull as heavy as they can 20% of their week. It's like once a week or so, or there are only specific times where they're like lifting the catastrophic failure, as they like to call it. The rest of the time they're doing lighter weights because they have a program. If you went to work and every moment at work was like a fight for your life to get everything done on time, you would burn out really, really fast. So at work, there are a lot of tasks that we do that are don't require a ton of our brain power or are tedious, and that having those kinds of things are an important break between the times when you have to be super focused and really perform and be on your game, because nobody can be that way 100% of the time. And interns in particular, they're young and they're learning, and so they need somebody who's gonna pour time and attention and training into them, like little plants that are just starting to grow. They need to be cultivated. And so I don't hire interns until I'm at a point where I can I have a significant amount of time that I can dedicate to helping them do that. If I just need somebody that's going to do low-level tasks that I don't have time to do, I don't use interns from American universities for things like that. I want to give to an intern as much as I'm getting from them. And so, if this intern's working 20 hours a week, I feel like they need 8 to 10 hours of either direct mentoring and instruction or being in the room while we do high level things so they can see how those things work. And so when I bring an intern in, I only expect to get 5 to 10 hours a week of actual, like go make some copies or like things like that. The other half of the time, I want them like learning and absorbing and picking things up like a sponge. And so I actually call it sponge time. So I'll be like, hey, why don't you come in? We're going to do this pitch to this client. And they'll be like, why? What do you want me to do for that? I said, sponge. It's just sponge time. I just want you to watch the process, see how it works. And, through osmosis, absorb as much as you can. And I had one intern who, after watching 7 or 8 pitches, was like, why don't you let me help put the presentation for the next pitch together? Because I think I understand the flow. And I was like, fantastic. Love to see it.
So based on what you just shared, which nobody has shared with me before, and nobody has shared here in the Leaders Lab before, is that the best strategy? I mean, because it sounds like that's, I love the sponge time. I love the idea of, just having them to come in to absorb and learn first before you actually give them responsibilities.
Right. I can never speak to what's the best. I can only speak to what's worked well for me. And it has worked well for me that if I need somebody to pour through an Excel spreadsheet and pick out all the email addresses of all the people that have founder next to their name from a LinkedIn dump or from an email list dump, I assign that to a freelancer who knows they're going to be doing that kind of work and is getting paid for all of their time. I don't assign that kind of work to an intern. Maybe a little bit, but I tend, if it's a big project and a big task, that's not something I'm going to assign to an intern. It's something I'm going to assign to a freelancer that from the Philippines or from somewhere else that wants to do that kind of work.
So you've done quite a bit of work overseas. I do want to ask you, in your early professional life, as you were getting the best individuals to come and work with you, and you mentioned briefly earlier, you mentioned about after that first hire. Well, we know why it's important to have the right people, but why is it important to really kind of train or invest additional time into that first hire?
Because the first hire, that first person, again, like I mentioned, you want to get people that know what you don't know, right? And so you want to make sure that you and that person, between the two of you, you have a fairly comprehensive view of the startup landscape, of the industry landscape, and because that first hire, they are going to be your most senior person next to you for the entire time that they're at your startup, at your company. And so, getting that one right, you don't want to hire somebody that then is like going to drive people away because they don't have the interpersonal skills, or who has a big, has some of the same blind spots you do, because you hired somebody that you could say, he's right about what he knows because I know everything he knows, which is unfortunately common for us to do. Hiring somebody who has only worked in the same industry that you've worked in, so you will know all the same things. You could do that, but it's really important. But again, if you do that, then you're going to have more blind spots because they're not going to know as many things that you don't know, which is the goal. But in terms of training them and making sure that they have your vision, it's because they're going, as you hire more employees, they're going to influence those employees almost as much as you do, because they're the entire other half of the company until you hire more people.
So what about after that first hire?
Well, after, like I said, the first hire is very important, but after the first hire, you want to get the best individuals you can, but recruit with a purpose. I feel fortunate that early in my professional life, I was an assistant manager for Starbucks, which meant I got to go through management training at a Fortune 500 business. I didn't love the job, and we could talk about that some other time as to why. But I'm glad I took it, but because they train you as if you own your own store. So we had to read the P&L statement every month for our store and be able to draw insights from it. They taught us how to conduct behavioral interviews, which are much harder to BS your way through. I really like behavioral interviewing, actually.
Why is that?
Because rather than being asked abstract questions like, what is your greatest strength and what is your greatest weakness? Or can you think, what are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself? Or instead of using hypothetical questions like, what would you do if you arrived to open the store and you noticed that the door was unlocked? You're asked experiential questions about things in your past work history. So things like, describe a time when you had to have a difficult conversation with a coworker. How did you handle it and what happened? And what they did was they trained us to evaluate the answers. So in their answer to that last question I mentioned, have you had a difficult conversation with a coworker and how did you handle it and what happened? As they're answering, I'm looking at, did that coworker's feelings matter and factor into their decision process? Do they have situational awareness, as evidenced by whether they had the conversation at the appropriate time in the appropriate place? Did they do it in the back when they were alone in the office, or did they do it out front, in front of a couple of customers? It matters. Did they communicate effectively? How did they handle the coworker's reaction? All those things are extremely important in deciding who I'm going to bring on, because I need somebody that, has certain attributes and skills, because I can't teach everything from the ground up. And I'd say the most important of all of those is probably communication. That's the skill that really matters most to me. Are you a great communicator with coworkers, with customers, with other stakeholders, with the CEO? If you turned around and saw that Michael Jordan was standing behind you, would you be tongue-tied?
Okay, now first of all, this we talking about Jordan here. So this is Jordan. Of course, you might. Wouldn't you at least be a little bit tongue-tied or starstruck?
Okay, well, I'll tell you a story about that. It's not Jordan, but it's close, and it's the most random thing that's ever happened to me in my life. although I've had a few of those, but this is the one that takes the cake. So
Okay.
when I was living in China, I did 4 years in South Korea, and then I was in China for almost 2 years. I was studying Mandarin at a university in Qingdao. And while I was there, I took a trip with my girlfriend up to Beijing. And so we're like coming out of a dance club near the worker stadium. There's a little hot dog stand, a little sausage stand right outside the club. And so I step up to it, and I asked the guys at the stand. I spoke enough Mandarin then to ask the guys at the stand, Migushi, yo mayo, and they were like, yo. So I was like, hey, are these hot dogs American style?
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah. I was like, oh, good, because I don't do the Chinese hot dogs. I don't dig on those.
Yeah,
but
it's not the same. It's not the same. For those of you who are listening, wondering like, what's wrong with Chinese hot dogs? It tastes like they got a lot of sugar in it. Okay, we don't like them. Okay,
and then. And I'm not sure where the meat comes from. But anyway, so...
Exactly.
Yeah. You were being very polite, but I'm not in China like you are now. So.
Exactly. I don't want to be censored and, okay.
So out in the corner of my eye, I see a really tall black guy up next to me. And I could, without even looking at him, he was wearing like American clothes. And without turning my head, I just go, hey, these are American style. You should get one. And he goes, yeah, I'm about to get me some of that. And I turn my head and look up, and my girlfriend starts to go, it's. And I go, Scottie Pippen. It was Scottie Pippen. And he was standing right next to me. And I go, you want to get your picture taken with him? And she goes, yeah. I go, I'll get my camera out. You go ask him. I took a step back and start fumbling for my camera. And she steps up, and she's completely starstruck. She goes, and then I lean forward and I go, excuse me, Scotty, my girlfriend's too dumb to ask you. She'd like to have her picture taken with you. You mind? And he goes, he didn't smile or nothing. He goes, is that thing on? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, let's make it click. And then he goes, click. And then dives into a taxi with a hot dog and a Chinese girl, and they were gone. And we're looking at each other like, did that just happen? 4 o'clock in the morning in Beijing, in the middle of nowhere, at a hot dog stand.
Wow. So you were a bit starstruck. Wow.
So me and her, this was this was over 10 years ago. So, at some point she and I went our separate ways, but I had this photograph. So I cropped it down to where it was just like a headshot of Scotty, and it's still currently in his Wikipedia article. I put it in his Wikipedia article. He's wearing like a pink polo shirt. And if you see there in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little black couple of pixels, and that's a little corner of her head. So that's I took that photo.
Let's just make sure we check out Wikipedia, go look at Scottie Pippen, and go look specifically for
scroll down for the picture
shirt.
of him with the polo shirt. It's like it'll look black behind his head because it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I took that photo.
I love it. I love it.
So anyway, it's not just that my point is, I don't get starstruck or tongue tied. I met Apple the app once. It was just like, hey, how you doing? It's cool. Anyway,
I love it.
It's not just who you communicate with. I talked about how are you in front of the CEO, how are you in front of clients and stuff like that. But it's also how well do you communicate in various channels, like in person or on the phone, via email, in written reports, in different kinds of copywriting, ad copy, website copy, email newsletter copy, blog articles, and also in various contexts, in casual conversation, during presentations, on Zoom, in webinars, at work-related social occasions, like an after-dinner cocktail reception during a trade show or a convention. Do you have a good sense of when to communicate what to whom? Timing of delivery is very, very important.
So can you give us an example of when you say timing of delivery is very important? Can you?
Oh, sure, of course. So at one time, I worked for the federal government, specifically the U.S. Census Bureau, and I led a team of people there. And after doing good work in my local area census office, I was rewarded by being assigned to travel around to struggling area census offices, some of them in other states, to help get them back on track.
Okay.
Federal civil service is a bit like the military in the sense that there's a chain of command, and typically you do not go over somebody's head. However, at my first temporary assignment, because I was sort of like, coming in to fix things, I impressed my boss's boss's boss, the area manager, because when my boss was unresponsive to calls and texts about a time-sensitive issue, I copied him in the message I sent to his boss. And when they didn't respond, I copied them, both of them actually, in my message to the area supervisor. So I never could be accused of going behind anyone's back or, as I had to go over their head. And I garnered additional trust as a result of how I handled it. And after that, I was never questioned if I ever had to go 1 or 2 levels up the chain of command in the future. For example, I was monitoring wildfires that were in the area that were affecting our local operations. I wasn't asked to do that. It was just something that's something else I look for, is that people who just take it upon themselves to do things because they care about the organization. And this was sort of how I was doing that. So I, noticed there were some wildfires. So I found a website where every morning I would get up and I would look and see where they were and where they were expected to go. And then I was funneling that information to my boss's boss, who needed it quickly so that they could make decisions and disseminate warnings. And the reason I was going directly to that person is because if I went to my boss first, who got up an hour later, by the time the information got out to everybody, it was going to be 11 a.m. and that was too late, So also, when a local citizen informed me that the state's deer hunting season was starting the following day, I went directly to the area manager, 3 levels above me, because that was statewide. And I knew that she needed that information since she handles the state right away. If I had sent it to my boss and waited for him to check his email and then forward it to his boss and wait again for it to get through her, through the chain of command, one of our census takers could have gotten shot while traveling on foot through forested terrain, which was not uncommon where I was working, which was south of Bend, Oregon, and north of the California border at the time. The area manager was able to inform all the field managers and supervisors who warned their staff and told them to wear bright clothing and proceed with caution. So, I was considered to have a good sense of timing of delivery. I delivered when someone needed information so quickly that it justified skipping levels in the chain of command. I never went over someone's head without a good reason, and I copied them on the message because managers don't like to be in the dark. I had a good sense of timing of delivery, and I delivered to all stakeholders.
I like that. And what I noticed as well, because you were timely, you also had information communicated to you in a timely manner. So it's kind of, it seemed like it was one of those things where it's like, timeliness became one of your pillars that you operated in as an employee or as, a recruit. And I like that, because when you mentioned that someone reached out to you to tell you, hey, deer hunting season is starting next. I mean, honestly, that was timely.
You know what she said? I just called her up, and usually, you email and stuff like that, but I called her up and I said, hey, this is Tony, with this area. And she's like, oh, hi, because I had just spoken to her yesterday about something else. And I was like, I just need to let you know, I just found out 2 minutes ago, deer hunting season in the state of Oregon starts tomorrow. And she went, oh my God. Okay. Thank you so much. I got to go. And she was the kind of person that would do this. If I was inappropriately going to her, she would be like, have you communicated this to your boss? And if you didn't get an answer you wanted, did you talk to their boss? They're all real heavy on making sure the chain of command is followed. But it was just like, thank you so much. And, what's my boss's boss going to do? Say, hey, I need you to funnel that stuff through me in the future? No. So, and what happened as a result of that is I began to be looked at as the leader in my local area that was like the go-to person. If you need something, go to Tony, he can get it done for you. And so if I had ended up staying with the census longer, I think a promotion wouldn't have been, too much further out.
So you were the type of leader that, first of all, you were the type of recruit that was so good at just different skills, various skills, and
all about communication.
Yeah. And I mean, and it led to greater promotion and things like that. So do you feel like that helped you to, like, you being recruited for this and then having that leadership position? Do you feel like that helped you with the way you started recruiting and hiring people afterwards?
It definitely helped me focus on, what I thought was important in terms of making sure I get people that are good communicators. I think that other attributes that are important as well. But I think that you can't really be a good leader unless you've been a follower, and hopefully a good follower. But it's important to sort of know your place in the organization and also to understand everybody else's place. The reason, I went to particular people is because I knew they were responsible for the area or for the situation that my information was going to have an impact on, And so if there's a leader that runs all of the area census offices in a particular district, we'll say, and this is going to affect the district, talk to them. If it's going to affect the whole state, no, we need to go up a level and talk to the person that's running state operations. But again, you always have to make sure that you inform the person, the next level down below them, who's still above you, that you're doing it, so it doesn't look like you're going behind their back. To me, being a good follower was a very important part of learning to be a good leader. I believe that my job as a leader is basically to set my people up for success. I'm working for them. I'm working for the person who's on the front lines placing Facebook ads because I need to do whatever I can to make sure that they're as successful as they can be. So it's like, what do you need? What can I get you? What'll help you do, a better job?
All right. So going back to, as you were talking about recruiting with a purpose.
Leadership expert Simon Sinek, he wrote a book I really like called Leaders Eat Last. And his most recent book was called The Infinite Game, although I haven't read that one yet. He posted a video clip on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago that really speaks to this point about recruiting with a purpose. And so he told this story that I don't know if it happened to him or if he heard it from somebody, but the story was of a bunch of recruiters that did a recruiting event at a local high school. And so they're standing on the stage, in the gym in front of all these high school seniors and maybe juniors too. And first the Air Force recruiter stands up and, he gives a presentation with a PowerPoint and shows, here are all the things that the Air Force can do for you. Here are all the, the different, fields that you can go into. And this is how it can affect your career when you get out. And then he sat down, and then the guy from the Navy stood up and he said, well, that's nice, but you might want to think about joining the Navy because, the Air Force, they don't guarantee your school. So it's possible that you could end up, doing training for something you're not interested in. But before you sign a contract, we'll guarantee you the school you're going to get to go to. And then he also talked, it was very benefit oriented. Here's the GI Bill. Here's what, we can do for you. And then he sat down. And then the Army recruiter stood up and he basically did the same thing, except for Army stuff, instead of Navy or Air Force. So again, it was very like, here's how the Army can help you. Then the Marine recruiter stood up and he walked to the edge of the stage and he made a big show of peering out and looking at all the students and even stopping and looking. And he goes, nope, I don't want any of you. I don't see anybody in this gym that looks like they could make it in my Marine Corps. If you think I'm wrong, I'll be at the back of the room. And he went and sat down. And what he was doing was, instead of recruiting to their interests or what they want, he was recruiting to his culture.
Wow.
So the culture, the if you want to call it corporate culture, but the organizational culture of the Marine Corps. What do they call themselves? The few, the proud, the Marines. Right? And so he wanted people that were going to rise to the challenge. You don't think I'm good enough? I want to talk to you. Those are the kinds of people he wants to recruit, because in recruiting to our culture, we don't want just to recruit people that will fit with our culture. Fit is something people talk about a lot. Is their culture fit? I want something more than culture fit. I want somebody who's going to be additive to the culture. I want somebody who's going to contribute to the culture and make the culture better. And so, I think that's just brilliant. They have to care about each other to do that. I look for selflessness as a quality. Empathy for their teammates and a willingness to help. Empathy is huge. I'd call it an attribute more than a skill, although it can be developed and strengthened. And it goes hand in hand with effective communication. It's the number one attribute that I look for. Legendary psychologist Carl Rogers, who founded person-centered therapy, defined empathy as the ability to see the world of your client through fresh, unfrightened eyes. Although, in the context of user-centered design, I'd say through fresh, unfrustrated eyes. Roger's version sounds nobler though, so I gotta give him credit.
Yeah.
Ultra successful entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk, excuse me. Gary V. He said, what a lot of people don't understand about empathy is that it's not just about caring. It's also the ability to understand people on a higher level.
Yes.
And that's what Rogers was really driving at, I think, and it's tremendously important. If you have deep understanding of the person that you're talking to and you're a great communicator, you'll be incredibly effective. Thinking about empathy is deep understanding that makes communication more effective. You can draw an analog to why companies conduct or buy market research. They're increasing their understanding of the target market before communicating with them in a marketing context so that marketing will be more effective. Companies need the same things people need: the ability to understand and the skill to communicate effectively.
Well, what else do you look for, though?
I would say that I look for emotional intelligence. Of course, I look for technical competence, but that's further down on my list because, where there's some holes, we can fill some of those holes in. It's also fairly easy to spot if somebody comes in and they're not technically competent by the way they answer more technical questions, but I'd rather have someone with the qualities I mentioned and raw talent over the refined talent that just can't be bothered. It reminds me of an old joke. There was a Confederate general that was addressing his troops right before the eve of a big battle, and he said, the enemy force, the Union Army that's advancing on us, is 4 times larger than we are, and so I'm going to need all of you to reach deep. And I'm going to need your best. I'm going to need you to give it all you got because, we're really outnumbered. And so they all got into position and they saw the Union Army marching towards them. And they were kind of in a forested area. So there were some trees, and through the trees, they could see them coming. And the order was given to attack. And the rifles went off and smoke filled the air. And the general is riding on his horse around to different positions and shouting orders and stuff like that. And then as he comes sort of around a bend and sees a clearing, he sees one of his soldiers just leaning up against a tree. He's got his rifle right here, and he's just kind of taking a break. He's got a wheat straw in his mouth. And he says, "You there, soldier, what are you doing?" And the soldier turns and says, "General, I already got my 4. That's exactly the kind of person I don't want in my organization. Wow. Somebody who goes, "You know what? I got my stuff done for the day, and I still an hour to go. So let's go see who there is to talk to, or go, let me see what's happening on Facebook, or, I want somebody who's like, when I have extra time, I want to pour that into help making the company better because I'm still being paid to be here. I want to I want to hire people that have a sense of pride in seeing the team and the company do well. And I don't see that from, I already got my work done, I'm good.
Yeah. No, I understand that completely. You mentioned raw talent, but you also in the beginning, you also talked about hiring the best. So how do you attract top talent when you're just starting out?
Sorry, I'm laughing because mostly you don't. Okay. What you do is you hire the best talent that you can get, and you make them better until you can attract the best talent that there is. It's just like, if you're a ball club and, who is it? The movie Moneyball, the Oakland A's, their budget was terrible because they weren't winning games. Billy Beane, the head coach, he started making different kinds of decisions about who he was going to bring onto the team and went with a data-driven approach instead of like his old, coaches and managers going, I think this guy's going to be good. And no, still, so his legs aren't, he doesn't have his legs anymore. And so they weren't doing it on speculating and, I've got 30 years in the business. They were going based on, we're basically buying runs with cash. And so who's a good value, who gets the most runs that we pay the least. And they were doing their trading and hiring based on that, and so, and they put together a championship team doing it that way. So they couldn't get the best talent. So what they did instead was they got the best talent that they could for the money that they had.
Okay.
If you're an attorney starting out your own practice and you want to hire an associate, you're not getting graduates of Harvard or Yale Law. If you start a marketing agency like I did, you're not getting a community manager or an email marketing specialist that's getting offers from the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. You're just not at that level yet. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't be. Once your startup becomes a unicorn or you pick up, $10 million in Series A funding, then you might compete for those kinds of hires. Now, if you're not at that level, then you have to take a chance on some raw talent that you can develop. Develop them, train them, and then transform them into expert talent, that top talent. And that is doable. When I started my agency, it was the same thing. Until my agency bagged a couple household name brands and national campaigns, we just couldn't get top talent. And to go after those top people when they're going to be more attracted to the top companies is really a waste of time unless you get lucky. So you want to concentrate your time where you're going to be the most effective. So you have to know what level you are. And as you move up and your company gets better and better, then you start attracting better talent. But in the beginning, I didn't have tons of press saying nice things about my work or my agency. I wasn't getting invited to give keynote addresses at conventions and trade shows yet. I didn't have a leading agency. I wasn't an A-list employer. My agency hadn't yet done work for Procter & Gamble or Colgate. I started my agency with 2 employees that I pirated from my previous employer because they didn't want to work there anymore, not because they loved my vision. And I used them and freelancers, those graphic artists I mentioned in the beginning that worked for Office Space, until revenue increased enough to hire more staff. I had, and then I was able to hire a copywriter away from one of the best agencies in town, MRM McCann, and he had been working on KitKat, doing their ad campaigns. And when I finally got good enough and big enough and had a good enough reputation, I was able to hire him away. And what did I do? I didn't hire him to be a copywriter. I hired him to be my chief content strategy guy, gave him a promotion and then trained him into the role over the next 30 to 60 days. So, but when I started, like I said, I had nothing to show except third-rate office space and a second-rate building. So what did I have to sell? Just me. And that's really what I was selling. Interviewees are asking, who are your A-list clients? None. How many successful campaigns? None. Our agency's very first marketing campaign was a flop, but you can help. You can help me get to where we want to go. And I can develop you and make you a better marketer. It's me and you. Trust me. And when you're starting out, that's all you got. That's it. That's all you got in your pocket. You got nothing else to sell. Just hope and belief in you. And in the real world, the absolute best candidates, if you want them, you're going to have to go up against people as good as you, companies as good as yours, companies maybe better than yours. You can talk all you want about the company and all the benefits and all the rewards that can come. But in the end, you have to ask them. You have to make it personal. Do you want to work with me? Because if you do, and they agree to come on, then there's a pretty good chance that you've got a great employee that cares as much about you and relationships as they do about the company. That's someone who is mission focused, but relationship oriented. And that's what you want.
So, we've actually talked a lot about hiring before and during, but what about after hiring?
Well, after hiring, you're leading, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, a genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. And I think that reaches back to a leader being the one who has the vision. In sharing that vision, you mold consensus. Leadership scholar Warren G. Bennis, he was like kind of the father of modern leadership studies. He said, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. And, that's not something a leader can do without their team. As underscored by Ronald Reagan, who said, the greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things. Well, I'm sorry. It's Ronald Reagan speaking in 1975. So you have to kind of extract the wisdom from the sexism.
Okay. All right. So ladies don't just look over.
It's not me.
Just
It's
look over
not
that.
me.
It's not him. It's Ronald. It's Reagan. And a totally different time as well.
Right.
So how do you get your people to do the greatest things? Like, how do you lead?
That's a really good question. I'm a championship player coach looking to put up big numbers for a championship team, my organization. In and of itself, hard work alone will not make you the best. There are billions of hard workers that are not the best at what they do.
True.
The path to being the best is an unceasing commitment to getting it right day in and day out. When I'm committed to something, I don't give up on it because I get tired, because it becomes stressful or difficult, or because I don't have all the answers. I push on and maintain my focus. I often don't even feel like I'm working because my commitment and focus are so strong. And I engender the same commitment and focus for members of my team, not by cheerleading or demanding more, but by experientially bringing out their own excellence, additional effort and skill that they didn't know that they possessed, that takes them and the company to new heights. I would say that I don't set a high standard for my team. I inspire my team to set a high standard for themselves, and then I help them win.
Okay, but so how do you do all of that? Like, let's get really specific. Like, how do you do all of that?
You ask good questions. It's challenging. It's good. It's like, that's all the theory, but like, let's get specific. Let's get real. It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
I believe that the ability to engender trust is one of the cornerstones of effective leadership. When people trust you, they guard themselves less and they reveal themselves more. They tell you what they fear. Okay. When I'm leading my team at maximum efficacy, my team trusts that I understand their problems and their needs, that I clearly see the road ahead, that I know what they fear, and that I know how to deal with it. Yeah. And that gives them confidence. While I'm mission focused, like I said, I'm also relationship oriented. So I always get to know my team well. That way, when I have to deliver critical feedback, they know it's coming from a good place, that I'm actually being helpful by showing them where they can improve, and that this actually increases their expertise and their value to the team and the company. We learn so much from getting things wrong than we do from getting them right. And that's why I see failure as a fantastic opportunity to learn that we should capitalize on whenever we can.
I love it.
I would say empathy is another cornerstone of effective leadership. We talked about that a little bit before, but specifically, you wanted me to operationalize these things. So, how do I practice empathy while I'm leading? Yes. First of all, when I hire somebody, and often periodically as I coach them, I ask them, listen, if you were me, how would you coach you? How would you talk to you? What would you be saying right now about what we're talking about? How would you be? Would you be patient and understanding? Or would you be a little like, let's get it going? Like, tell me. Like, I want to know the best way to reach you. Help me coach you. The number one thing.
What is their response usually? I'm sorry, I didn't want.
No, it's a good question.
I mean, when you said that, like, I'm like, what is their response? Are they usually like, the type of person where they're like, well, I think I would say, or are they usually their authentic selves?
I would say I get a mixture of reactions to that question. Some people, like the introverts, they need to think about it. The extroverts are like, here's what to do. Here's what I need,
Yeah.
And so as long as I allow them both their process, people talk about extroverts as being talkative and introverts as being quiet. But what I learned in school was that extroverts relate outwardly before they relate inwardly, and introverts relate inwardly before they relate outwardly. So my professor said an extrovert needs to put their hands in dirt to understand it, but an introvert needs to understand dirt before they'll put their hands in it.
Wow.
And I really paid it. His name was Daniel Salter. He was my professor when I was in grad school at Penn State University, and he was brilliant.
Wow.
I like to try and give people their process. And so if I give them a little time, the introverts a little time, they'll tell me the best way to coach them. And what's interesting is the variety of responses. Sometimes people are like, yeah, just be patient and help me get there. Other people are like, I need you to sort of kick me in the ass. Like, I need you to like kind of be on top and be like on top of me, I should say. I don't love coaching that way, but what I do like to do is coach to people the way they want to be coached to.
Yes.
So that's my style. And I would also say that if as part of that, in asking that question and questions like that, the number one thing that you can do is understand. And that's where the empathy comes in. Sometimes all you have to say is, listen, I understand what you're going through.
Yes.
I understand why this is hard.
Yeah.
I understand what a struggle it is. And I can see that you're frustrated. So I acknowledge it. And then I say, here's how I can help. Third cornerstone, I would say, is, I'm not sure how many cornerstones there are. We'll when we get to it, we'll know what shape of a structure we're building, I guess. A third cornerstone is fairness. There's this feeling that everybody has to be treated equally, but that's not possible. Not everybody is equal in all things. People have different skill levels. People have different experience levels. People have different comfort levels with different things. People have, different levels of motivation for different things. We were all created equal in value, but we're not all clones of each other. We're not all the same. So, but even though we can't all be treated equally, we all need to be treated fairly, equitably.
Yes.
So that's what I do. I strive to be fair and equitable in my approach to and treatment of everyone I work with. Inspirational goal setting is at least what I call it. Inspirational goal setting is a fourth cornerstone of effective leadership. A good leader can galvanize individuals into a team by stating a common goal or identifying a problem. Before we find a solution for it, first I have to identify the problem and then suggest a strategy for how we're going to overcome the problem. And I always do say suggest. It's not, there have been times where I've said, okay, here's the problem. This is how I think we got to go about fixing it. And I've had somebody who works for me go, well, actually, I've dealt with it before, and this is how we fixed it with this other job I had. And I have gone, that's a much better idea. Let's do it that way.
Yeah.
So I suggest most of the time, unless there's a crisis, or I've been given marching orders from upstairs that are not editable, I make suggestions on and try to field an organic process of how we come to decide how we're going to attack problems. But that's my job as a leader. If I don't suggest a strategy, then people are just going to take it upon themselves to try and figure one out. And when that happens, they don't realize it, but they often try to do what's best for themselves. So we all benefit from someone bringing them together and saying, if you can help the person next to you, and that person next to you can help that person next to them, and then it'll come around full circle. And then we've all just helped each other, which is what an effective team does. Yeah. That's how I get my group to operate as a team, all pulling together, focused on an objective we're singularly committed to achieving.
That's awesome. I know that you've been mentioning these cornerstones. Are these so far you've talked about 4 different cornerstones. Are these cornerstones that you've come up with yourself, or how?
I want to say no. It's one of those things is like when they ask a musician like who influences you, I take in a lot of information about leadership and about management from some of the sources I've mentioned, 𝗖𝗟𝗏𝗘, Gary Vaynerchuk, lots of other people. And I would be disinclined to say, oh, all of this is mine, because I'm afraid somebody would pop up and go, actually, this guy gave a talk a month and a half ago, and he mentioned 3 of your 6 cornerstones, Tone, and then I'm plagiarizing. So no, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I can say that. I'm standing on other people's shoulders and relating their experiences through my particular worldview and lens.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, though, because I don't ever want to get accused of copying somebody else, which I may very well be doing, to some extent. I don't know.
Okay, so you mentioned 3 out of 6 cornerstones.
Yeah, there are 2 more that I can think of right now that that I could tell you about. So
sure.
So we've covered 4 so far. And I think a 5th one, a 5th cornerstone of effective leadership would be recognition. The people that work on my team are the reasons that I'm successful. They want to know that I appreciate what they're doing. So I recognize them on a daily basis. I
Wow.
believe, and then when I say recognize, I don't mean standing them up and handing them a certificate, making them employee of the month, clapping. I mean, it's little things. I believe in catching someone doing something right instead of always complaining about what they don't do well. So every time something happens that I know wouldn't have happened without them, I let them know, hey, Mita, we wouldn't have gotten such a great conversion rate if it wasn't for you. You crushed it yesterday, and I'm impressed with your focus and your dedication. That recognition, that gratitude elicits their own gratitude, and this often increases their willingness to do even more. I want everybody so loving on everybody else in my group that, that they feel like it's like a second home when they come in. They feel supported. They feel like if they have trouble that they're going to get helped, that, a sense of inclusivity and belonging. Those things are very, very important to me to cultivate in my corporate culture.
Okay. I love it.
And then lastly, I would say that, I talk a lot about being the best, being a championship team, putting up championship numbers, being a championship player coach. And I think that excellence requires confidence, which is yet another cornerstone. So I guess we're building
That's a tweet. Listen, that's a tweet. I'm
going
to just tell you, excellence requires confidence. Oh, Tony, I feel that all in my DNA right now. Like, I just want to go print that off, laminate it, and slap it up on my wall. Like, excellence requires confidence. Oh,
I've never met somebody who's a master at what they do that wasn't confident. And I don't mean to say they're like all in your face about it or they're arrogant, but like, when you get to that point of world-class excellence, you also know how hard it is to maintain that level. The people that I've seen under the most pressure have been world-class people because, I once heard Chris Rock say in an interview, I forget, he was being interviewed by another comedian. He said, I'm out here hitting homers and you don't even know how hard it is to keep doing that consistently every time. And I sort of I got sort of that chill in my bones when he said it, because I feel like that with marketing. I'm out here crushing it, but it's not like when you get so good that you can just sort of kick back and coast on that, because there's somebody else that's just as good that's trying to be number one too. And so you really, the better you get, the more energy. I mean, there are some efficiencies. You start learning what not to do so you don't make as many hopefully you don't make the same mistakes you made before. So as you make a mistake, you're like, oh, new mistake, won't do that again. And so you learn as you go. But at the same time, you sort of have to put more energy into learning new things, making sure you stay current. One thing that I have to put a lot of energy now is to staying current with marketing technology, because it's changing so fast. So I need to know, what's new in CDPs. I need to know what's new in analytics, business intelligence. What are the new platforms that are coming out? What's happening with account-based marketing? What's happening with inbound marketing? And it's every year there's something new, something different. Some of the old players are coming out with new features. There are new players coming up that you've never heard of. And Scott Brinker actually is a marketing technology expert that I spend a lot of time paying attention to, because he's just dedicated to MarTech. He helps me stay current. But like I said, so, it doesn't get easier because you get better at it. Back to excellence requires confidence. Nobody's ever done anything great without confidence. So I want my teammates to believe, and I'm not talking about confidence for me. I'm talking about confidence for them. How do I instill confidence in them? How do I make sure they understand that they're world-class? So I want my teammates to believe that what we're doing is going to lead to a big win. I want them to think anything is possible. They have to buy into that. If you believe that and you tell them that, then you have set them up for success. If you don't believe it, you tell them. You can fake it a little bit, but I think that's really dangerous because, like I said, trust is the first cornerstone, and I don't recommend it. In the end, when all is said and done, what they do is what matters. It's not what I know. It's not what I think. It's in the end, it's what they do. They are executing. And so I could have the greatest vision in the world, but if they don't execute it because I didn't lead them, then it's not going to happen. So I've got to make them believe that they can do anything. And that starts with my believing that they can do anything.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Do you see, Entreleaders? Do you see why I said that you would be in for a treat today? Because I feel like Tony just took us to another level here. And it's just, it has been, I would say probably, and I've had quite a few segments this year, but for me, I would say that this has been probably the most impactful in terms of building a team, getting the right people. Getting the right people so far. So, oh my goodness, Tony, I have to say thank you so much for being in the lab with us on today. And tell the
My
people
pleasure.
how can they get in contact with you?
Well, if you want to get in contact with me, I would say a good way to do it is just via email. I'm one of those people that doesn't mind sharing my email address. So if you want to do that, then it's @alumni.psu.edu, or you can just send me a direct message on Twitter or on Instagram. But my Instagram's a little like more personal stuff. I mean, feel free to follow me, but my Twitter is I just use for marketing purposes, or I should say I just tweet marketing stuff for professional purposes. So that's also a good way to reach me.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who are looking on the screen right now, you can see here is his email address. I threw it up there real quick. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of the podcast, don't worry, you can check in the show notes. All of this information, how to contact him, is in the audio version. Of course, if you're watching the video version, you can also go and check the description box. All of this will be linked so you can contact him directly. But for those of you who are just want some visuals, you can check out right here. Here's his IG. It is Tony Ahn 75. And then also with Twitter, like he said, he tweets out marketing things. You have @_Tony Ahn _. And then, of course, the LinkedIn URL where you can go and check him out. It is right here. It is simply Tony Ahn. You can check him out. Again, Tony, thank you so much for
Well, it's not Tony Ahn. It's on Tony.
On Tony. I'm sorry. Listen, you all can see it right there on the screen. I apologize. I'm looking backwards here, so I'm actually looking at everything in reverse. So it is on Tony. Thank you for that correction. And again, Tony, thank you so much for being with us in the Leaders Lab. Honestly, I would love to have you back so you can go deeper into some of these leadership cornerstones. I mean, we're here talking to leaders, and so I appreciate everything that you've contributed today.
It's my pleasure. I'll leave you with a little quote. So Jack Welch, who was the CEO of the largest American corporation, General Electric, said, "Before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others."
Wow. I love it. Before growing yourself, after growing others.
Yeah. I was very happy to be here today. Thank you.
You are absolutely welcome, and thank you so much once again.
You bet.
Listen, Entreleaders, I hope that you enjoyed this very special segment today on the Leaders Lab podcast with Mr. Tony Ahn. Again, you can find out how you can connect with him through checking out the show notes, or if you're watching the video version, the description notes. I hope that you got something out of this. Don't forget to connect with him on social media. You have all of his details there. And also you can connect with me on social media everywhere at DrCharityTV. That's on LinkedIn, Facebook, for now, Facebook, because I will be closing my Facebook soon, but not all of the others. I will keep everything else up so you guys can make sure you stay connected with me here, and especially on YouTube, and of course the podcast. We got to keep that going. So I do want to say thank you so much for your time today, and I will see you all next week in the lab.
Thank you for listening to the Leaders Lab podcast. Visit our website at www.drcharitytv.com